Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse Brackenbury. I'm the Executive Director for the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy. Sorry for a little bit of a late start, a few technical issues, and still working through one of those. So if you'll give me 10 more seconds. Okay. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, the second community meeting about our Chin Park lighting study. As I said, I'm Jesse Brackenbury. I am the Executive Director of the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy. We are the nonprofit with the responsibility for the downtown park that runs from Chinatown to the north end. And we have responsibility for the care and the programming and the public art and the improvements about which we'll be talking to you tonight. I want to say thank you to Vanessa Wu as well as Melissa Lowe from Councillor Flynn's office, who will be providing translation services this evening. If you need the interpretation services in Cantonese or in Mandarin, both are available. Simply click on the globe at the bottom of the screen and select the Chinese flag for Cantonese and, sorry, the German flag for Mandarin. Unfortunately, Zoom does not provide more specific options, so our apologies for the inaccuracy in the flag buttons. During the presentation, please feel free to ask questions by using the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. We'll take some time at the end of the meeting for Q&A. I am joined tonight by Rachel Lake, our Marketing and Community Affairs Manager, and by Rebecca McKevitz, our Capital Projects Manager. Before we get to the lighting study, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the really hard times that all of us are in. This has been an incredibly challenging year for all of us at the Conservancy and in the community. COVID-19 has made 2020 an unprecedented year on the Greenway, and we're really proud of the work that our staff and our board and our volunteers have done along the whole Greenway, and particularly in Chinatown. Rachel is going to kick us off talking a little bit about some of that work that we've been doing in this very unusual year.
Thanks, Jesse. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Lake, as Jesse said, the Marketing and Community Affairs Manager at the Greenway Conservancy. So as Jesse said, the Conservancy is the nonprofit that operates and maintains the Greenway, stretching from the north end to Chinatown. This means we handle everything from the programming you see every year to the public art installations, our Greenway fountains, and our organically maintained lawns and gardens. As Jesse noted, this year has been incredibly challenging for the Conservancy, with much of our programming moving online and slowing down significantly in the park. As we continue to adapt to a changing world, the Greenway's connection to our community of residents and visitors has been our focus. Throughout this unique season, the Conservancy has worked to expand ways that our residents and visitors can bring the Greenway home. We've added online resources that span from coloring materials to how-to guides on planting your own garden. In addition, shown here, the Conservancy in June began submitting a regular feature to Sampan's physical and digital newspaper to share our work in the park with a wider audience in Chinatown and beyond. Through our attendance at local community meetings, such as the Chinatown Safety Committee, the Chinatown Coalition, as well as many community meetings and walks like the one shown here, some of the most consistent feedback we've heard is to increase safety throughout the Greenway. Our Greenway Rangers and staff continue to work closely with Boston City Councilor Ed Flynn's office, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services, and the Boston Police Department on these issues. So as many of you know, this fall, the Conservancy installed a new public art installation, Lantern Stories, by Boston artist Yuan Wu. We want to thank our community jury partners as well as Yuan Wu. Our jury partners consisted of the Josiah Quincy Elementary School, the Powell Art Center, Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Coalition, A Voice, the Asian Community Development Corporation, Chinatown Main Street, the City of Boston Arts Commission, the Greenway Public Art Advisory Group, and the many, many other community members and business owners who worked with UN and participated in story sharing workshops and conversations throughout her community process. The lanterns are lit daily from 4 p.m. to 7 a.m. and are on display through the fall, located above the plaza on the Greenway in Chinatown. Coming up soon, as you'll see, on October 29th, we'll be hosting a webinar with UN Wu exploring lantern stories in Boston's Chinatown. We'll be sure to share information on registering following tonight's event. Next slide, thank you. As Jesse said, this season, was particularly difficult in the Greenway and in Chinatown especially, and we were really proud to partner with We Love Boston Chinatown, a resilience campaign led by a collective of Chinatown nonprofit organizations, businesses, residents, and city officials to reactivate and heal Chinatown's economic and social fabric. The Conservancy collaborated on marketing and signage efforts as seen here, and invite visitors and residents to discover and support local restaurants who may not have had available indoor or outdoor seating at this time in a designated area in Chin Park on the Greenway. Through We Love Boston's Chinatown campaign, we wanted to say an extra special thank you to the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Council and the Powell Art Center for their organization of this year's Experience Chinatown. This was one of the few programs we were able to put on in the Greenway where normally we have a full range of music in the park. So this was extra special this year. The Greenway was proud to collaborate on several events in the park during this month-long celebration, including Takeout Thursdays and additional music and calligraphy performances like the one seen here. After hearing community feedback around the Chinatown Viewing Garden from many community stakeholders, the Conservancy this season added new signage to the fence line with information on the garden and plants within the Chinatown Viewing Garden to engage passersby. In addition, we are also incredibly proud to work with the Suhu family, who we meet with quarterly, to add historical signage in Mary Suhu Park to honor the park's namesake. Community leader and organizer Mary R. Suhu. We are incredibly proud that all this new signage was bilingual as well. Alongside these improvements and initiatives, the Conservancy has been engaging stakeholders and working towards tonight's presentation on where we are in bringing enhanced lighting to Chinatown on the Greenway. And I'll pass it off to Rebecca.
Thank you, Rachel. So as Jesse said, I'm Rebecca McKevitz, Capital Projects Manager here at the Kennedy Greenway Conservancy, and really excited to be here with you all tonight to talk about enhanced lighting in Chin Park. We'll go on to the next slide where we'll look a little bit at where we've been and where we're going. So we started this project about a year ago and have made great progress since then. So we worked through schematic design and then had a community meeting in February in person. And so thank you for everyone who came out to that community meeting and gave us your feedback in person or in writing. And then we also followed up with a survey after the fact, and we were able to get even more feedback that way. So thank you if you were able to provide feedback in any of those forums. So then over the past couple of months, we've been working through design development and wanted to come here tonight to sort of show you the progress that we've made and some of the plans that we have moving forward. Next slide. So when we began this project, we sort of, we broke the park down into 5 different areas to think about how we can enhance lighting in each of these areas. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the park, but for those of you who aren't, I will quickly walk through these 5 areas, starting on the right-hand side of your screen, which is the northern end of Chin Park. And so this is the corner of Essex Street. You might think of it as the gateway into the park. It's where you'll find the sampan sail and the modern archway. This is a place where people usually walk through, but maybe they don't linger as long, although you might have seen some of our public art installations that often happen in this area of the park. So when we worked through schematic design, there were 3 design ideas for lighting in this area of the park. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those are and how we're going to move forward. So then we get to the Serpentine Path, which is where you'll find the waterfall and the bamboo cages. There's sort of the beautiful horticultural buffer to the street, but that can create dark areas, and so we sometimes see negative activity on the Serpentine Path. We went through a big horticultural renovation this past year to improve sight lines into the Serpentine Path, but we imagine that lighting the Serpentine Path could also help with these safety concerns. Then we move further south or left on your screen into the plaza. This is sort of the most diversely active place in Chin Park. So lots of festivals and events happen here. You know, neighbors come out to socialize and spend time together. This is where the play cubes are. So, you know, this is a very active place. Tourists come here, lots of photo opportunities. And so there are a couple of ideas for enhanced lighting in the plaza. Then you'll walk past the historic Chinatown gate and the Mason Plaza, and you'll arrive at Mary Suhu Park, which is, again, active day and night. But we also see some negative activity here. There's a big vent stack building in the middle of Mary Suhu Park that can cast shadows, and it's, you know, sometimes hard to see around. So we do have some beautiful catenary or string lights on the west side of Mary Suhu Park that seem to work very well, but we need to address the southern and eastern side of the vent stack building. And there are two options for light here, and then similar in the viewing garden, which is the last area of the park, which is behind a fence and an area that we've really focused on growing beautiful horticulture. And so again, we have an idea for lighting in that area. Next slide. So like Jesse said, and like I said, we had, you know, previous community meeting, and we've done some stakeholder outreach and had lots of conversations. We've heard from the community. So we wanted to take a minute to just talk about what we've heard from you and how that's influenced our decision-making moving forward. Next slide. So the most consistent feedback that we heard, and Rachel touched on earlier, is safety. We want to improve the safety in Chin Park and make everybody feel safe, you know, day and night to spend time in any area of the park. So we're going to prioritize lighting projects that are in sort of the darkest places in the park. We also want to make sure to select appropriate light fixtures for the particular places. So like I just said, we sort of broke the park out into 5 different areas, but you know, there's lots of nook crannies, and so we have to think about choosing the right kind of fixture at the right height with the right brightness to make sure that everything is lit properly. And you know, we've heard from our lighting designer that the best way to make a park space feel safe when it comes to lighting is to make sure that we minimize contrast and really create a consistent level of lighting throughout the park. So making sure that there aren't bright spots and dark spots and shadows, but that there's consistent lighting throughout. Next slide. We also heard from you that we should prioritize lighting projects that address the areas of the park that are most heavily used. So namely the plaza. You know, that's the place, like we said, lots of events happen here, lots of socializing and gathering and neighbors meeting up. So we want to utilize lighting enhancements to make this area of the park feel inviting and active and festive and fun. Next slide. We've also received some feedback about sort of specific aesthetics for how the light fixtures themselves actually look. And so we're going to ensure that existing cultural light elements in the park are functioning properly. For example, in the top left corner, you'll see the sampan sail. And in this photo, there's 5 LED light strips that are functioning, but right now, several of those are burnt out. So we want to make sure that everything that is out there is functioning properly. We also want to implement fixtures that are representative of the community, and we have one really exciting idea of how we think we might be able to do that. We're going to ensure integration with the existing design of Chin Park. So, you know, putting fixtures in the park that will illuminate the, you know, intricate, beautiful details that have been designed into the park, like the fan pavers and the bamboo cages. And we're going to continue to experiment with temporary art and lighting installations. So right now, like Rachel said, we have UN Wu's lantern stories in the plaza, and we also have the Year of the Mouse by Fair and Die in the Serpentine Path. So we'll continue to do that as well. Next slide. And then, of course, we have also been hearing from the community that they want more greenery in Chin Park. So softening the hardscape by replacing it with horticulture and creating a denser tree canopy that can increase shade and help with air quality. Next slide. So, like I said, when we came to you the last public meeting, we were in schematic design, and now we've moved into design development. Next slide. And so you'll see here an example of sort of the level of detail that we're working at right now. Our design team is working through design development and into construction documents. So thinking about the implications of each of these fixtures in the park and where they fit and how they all work together. So just wanted to share with you all, and so you kind of understand the level of detail that we're working at right now. So again, this is an example of a design development drawing. Next slide. Okay, so before I jump in here, I just want to check and see if Jesse or Rachel have anything that they want to add before we run through.
Thanks, Rebecca. I just want to remind folks that the Q&A function is available at the bottom of the screen. So if you have any questions now or at any point in the presentation, please feel free to enter those through the Q&A function, and we'll be doing question and answer at the end of the event.
I don't have anything to add, except that I think you're doing a great job, Rebecca. Keep it up.
All right, we'll keep going. So again, we're back to the map that we've broken out the park into 5 areas. So wanted to walk through sort of how we're going to prioritize the different ideas that have been put forward for each area. So we will, in the next couple of slides, show more imagery that will show you what each of these ideas will actually look like. So at the corner of Essex Street, I had addressed the sampan sail that needs upgrades and replacement LED strips. So we have, put that at the top of the priority list. But there have also been pole lights that have been recommended for this area, and a red light that would illuminate the modern archway. And so those 2 ideas we would like to do, but we see those as sort of subsequent projects pending funding. So then in the Serpentine Path, there were 2 ideas put forward. One was light poles and the other was illuminating the bamboo cages. Because we want to focus on safety, we're going to do the light poles first. But we do think that, the bamboo cages would be beautiful illuminated as well. I had also mentioned that we're talking about a possibility of adding more greenery, and so wanted to show you on the plan where we're talking about, and I have a more detailed drawing that I can show you of that. But you can see the possible future plant bed location sort of right in the middle of the plaza, adjacent to the current Blue bike station that's there. Then in the plaza, at the last meeting, we talked about new light poles and new catenary lights in the plaza. At the time, those were sort of 2 separate ideas, but we realized that they work well together and they're kind of contingent on one another. So we're going to prioritize both of those projects for phase 1. And then in Mary Suhu Park, we also heard from you all loud and clear that the catenary lights there are working well and they're quite beautiful. So we're going to continue that fixture on the south and the eastern edge of the vent stack. And then I also mentioned how we have an idea for a piece of lighting infrastructure that would represent the community, and that's something that we see happening in the viewing garden. So we'll talk a little bit more about this idea of artistically enhanced lighting. So here on this slide, everything that you see in green text, we are imagining happening hopefully in spring of 2021, and then anything in the black bold text would happen subsequent to that. Next slide. All right, so just to reiterate, these two projects, the Serpentine Path poles and the additional Catenary Lights in Mary Sugu, we see these as priority because they address the safety concern. And so that's why we are preliminarily planning on moving forward with them in the spring. Next slide. In addition, we're also planning on adding new poles and Catenary Lights in the plaza because that's the place where it's so active. Lots of people are spending time here doing lots of different types of activities. Next slide. And then, of course, the sail light, we want to make sure that it's functioning properly and looking its best. So for the sake of aesthetics, we want to upgrade that in phase 1, 2. So these 4 projects are what we hope will happen this spring 2021. Next slide. And then these 3 additional projects would happen subsequent to that. So again, additional poles at Essex Street, a red illuminated light on the modern archway, and then illuminating the bamboo in the bamboo cages. So that would happen at a later date pending funding. Next slide. Okay, and so I had mentioned this idea of artistically enhanced lighting. So this is a photo of the Chinatown viewing garden, and you can see the horticulture is doing great. We put new signage up this year, like Rachel mentioned. We see this as an opportunity to do something really unique and special, something like that we don't have anywhere else on the Greenway, something that really is representative of the community. So sort of as a separate project on a separate timeline, the Conservancy would put out a request for qualifications for an artist, and we would work with them to come up with some kind of lighting infrastructure that's really unique and interesting and captivating. And we just see this as a really unique opportunity. So again, sort of as a separate process happening in tandem, we would be thinking about how to represent the community with lighting in the viewing garden. Jesse or Rachel, do you have anything to add about this one?
Yeah, you know, we've heard such terrific feedback specifically to Yuen Wu's artwork, and you know, she gathered so much community feedback to tell those stories in her artwork, and we see that kind of opportunity with putting something here, but something that's permanent. One of the example images in this slide, the 4th from the left, is from Hinghey Park in Seattle, where a similar kind of process led to a special artist-inspired lighting installation in that park in Seattle's Chinatown. And, you know, I think our continued experimentation, as Rebecca said, with different types of installations and the continuing feedback that comes to us about those, you know, has inspired this idea for here. So we're excited to do this, and it would have a separate process, as Rebecca said, that would allow for more and continuing dialogue.
Great, thank you, Jesse. Next slide. Great, and so this is what I was referring to earlier about adding greenery to the plaza. So in the bottom left, you'll see a photo of the area of the park that we're talking about adjacent to the current Blue Bikes bike station. And we feel like this is a good opportunity to add an additional plant bed to Chin Park. It would add greenery and shade. It would add some seating on the curvilinear sort of wall, kind of like what's adjacent to the play cubes now. The way that it's oriented kind of works well. You could sit there in the shade and be watching a festival or an event in the plaza. It's, you know, again, proximate to the play cubes. It's sort of out of the way of festivals, but again, kind of adds that seating element and also a nice buffer from the street. So, you know, we had originally, when we started this project, tried to think about how we could add more shade to the plaza and really couldn't come up with a feasible way of implementing any kind of shade structures. So we thought that this was an opportunity to add some shade and also some greenery, which, like I said, we've really been hearing a lot of call for. So pretty soon here, you'll see a poll pop up on your screen. And because we hadn't brought this idea to the community at the last meeting, we want to bring it to you now. And so if you would take a minute to just let us know your initial feedback about this idea of an additional plant bed in the plaza. If it's something you're interested in, maybe you still have questions about it, something you've been hoping for a long time. So let us know on this poll what your initial thoughts are, and then that will help us sort of decide how to move forward with this idea. All right, next slide.
Rebecca, why don't we pause for a second,
Sure.
because I believe this will have to be read for the those who need a translation. And so let's give a second for that. Okay, why don't we proceed and people can continue voting?
Yes, absolutely. All right, next slide. So now that we've sort of run through all of the ideas and how we're thinking about phasing those ideas, we wanted to quickly touch on the project cost and our plans for fundraising. Next slide. So all told, all of the lighting elements that we've talked about, including the viewing garden and this idea of an additional plant bed, is about $1 million. So a significant investment in Chin Park, but one that we think would make quite an impact. So you can see that we have broken out these projects kind of as we've talked about them tonight. The first phase being those 4 projects that we talked about, the sail, the Serpentine Path poles, the plaza poles and Catenary Lights, and the Mary Subu Catenary Lights. We hope that those 4 projects will move forward this spring. We do have some cash in hand to begin construction on those projects, but you'll see that we are a little bit short. So we're actively fundraising to make up that delta and hopefully be able to proceed with all of them in the springtime. And then the bamboo cages, the poles at Essex, the red light at the gate, you know, that would be subsequent pending, you know, additional fundraising. We talked about how the artist-inspired lighting would sort of be a separate process. So you can see the budget outlined here. And then we've also come up with a ballpark number for the plant bed in the plaza. So just wanted to give folks kind of an understanding of how this breaks down. And yeah, we're excited to be able to move forward with several of these projects in the springtime. Jesse, anything you want to add here?
I think while this is a big number, we are optimistic about our ability to raise these funds. You know, that will take some time, but I think the first phase projects, we will be moving forward in the spring, and we very much expect to move forward with others.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next slide. Great. So we'll talk a little bit about the timeline and next steps. Next slide. So thank you all for making the time to come to this community meeting and engage with us and provide your feedback. And so we're going to spend the next couple of months finalizing our construction documents so that, again, we can understand the construction impacts for all of these projects that we've brought forward, and we're going to continue fundraising. Then at the beginning of 2021, we're going to hopefully be able to get a contractor on board to start procuring the materials and get all of the lighting, you know, the light fixtures on site, so that when the good weather comes in the spring, we're able to sort of break ground as soon as possible. So spring 2021, you can expect to see some construction out in the park. And then throughout 2021 and 2022, we'll continue to fundraise and further the design and implementation of all of the other ideas that we outlined. So next slide. Great. Thank you again all for making the time tonight. And I want to say thank you to AECOM and Lumen Studios, who have been our engineer and designer on the project. And thank you to the Greenway Business Improvement District and the Mass Cultural Council for their financial support of this project. So as we've talked about, the Q&A function is at the bottom of the screen. We hope that any questions you have, you'll submit them there. We have some time to answer them. And so I'm going to pass it off to Rachel, who's going to run through that portion of the meeting. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So while I give a little bit of time for folks to submit questions, I just wanted to remind folks of the various ways they can connect with the Greenway Conservancy. So I highly encourage everyone here to follow our social media channels, check out our website. We have a lot of great material online this year. As I said earlier, with the kind of slowdown of programming in the park, we pushed a lot of our stuff digitally and online. And then also, I know there's been a lot of talk about fundraising tonight, so also would encourage folks to help out the Greenway by joining our community of supporters. There's lots of ways to give. We have an incredible volunteer program out in the park this year especially. They were instrumental in a lot of our work in Chinatown. So just want to give that shout out to our volunteers as well. And we'll give a couple more minutes for folks to submit questions. Thank you to those that have submitted already. All right, great. It looks like we can get started. So Jesse, I'm going to start with you. We have a question. Is there any plan to install a public restroom near the Mary Suhu Park on the Greenway?
Thank you for the question, Rick. As some of you know, there was a community process that we began in 2017 when the city of Boston let us know that one of the J.C. Deco automated public toilets was available and could be added in the Chinatown area. There are, unfortunately, as many of you know, problems with public urination in the Mary Suhu portion of the Greenway. We went through community meetings. We identified a couple of locations. We narrowed them with your feedback. We provided that information to the city, and along with numerous letters of support from many of you and community organizations, through a rather drawn out process, the city finally began construction to place a toilet in the park last year at the agreed upon location, and dug up the plaza, and then hit an underground utility that they had not noticed in the construction drawings. And so they had to button the park back up, and that location was ruled out. The city has now studied the utility drawings and concluded that there are no viable locations in the Greenway in Chinatown. And they have looked comprehensively at Mary Suhu and the plaza and other locations that are proximate and have ruled them all out. They issued a letter to this effect, and it is very disappointing. It's very disappointing that we've all been at this for 3 years to come to this place. And so at this point, the answer, unfortunately, is no. There is not a toilet coming to the Greenway in Chinatown, in Mary Suhu or in other locations. I'm sorry. I know it is a topic that, thank you, Melissa, Councillor Flynn has been very passionate about, and so this is an ongoing problem, not just on the Greenway, but for all the tourists and visitors and residents and others in Chinatown, that there are not enough public restrooms, and South Station is quite a ways away. So, we expect Councillor Flynn to continue to advocate for this in spaces that are not on the Greenway.
We have another question that came in. What sort of fundraising sources are you looking into? Grants, traditional donors, other?
So principally, we are looking at foundations and grants. There are, it is obviously a challenging economy, and we recognize that the needs are great for many things. As an individual donor, if any of you on the phone are interested in supporting this project, Rachel put up the information in the slides about how you can donate, and we will include that in the chat and Q&A functions as well. But principally, we anticipate that this funding will come from foundations. And in a number of cases, there are foundations that are interested in supporting, that would probably not be interested in other work in other parts of the Greenway, and that are interested in particularly infrastructure or permanent capital improvements. And so we both are identifying those foundations and feel optimistic about them, and feel like they don't cannibalize our other fundraising. They don't trade off with money they would have otherwise given us. So that's great too, to tap into some new sources.
Great, thank you. I have another one around the term catenary lights that was used a couple times during the presentation. What are catenary lights?
That's a good question. So catenary lights are string lights. You've seen them probably over lots of restaurant patios. And again, they're existing in Mary Suhu. We also use them further north on the Greenway at the Trillium Beer Garden. So they're durable, permanent, all season sort of string lights. And again, we've had great success with them in Mary Suhu Park. They've been sort of low maintenance and great payoff, and create, great ambiance. So we're excited to use them in the plaza and add more to Mary Suhu Park as well.
Great, thank you. We have another question. When is the removal of the mounds in Mary Suhu Park? Jesse, you want to take that one?
Sure. So there are granite mounds in Mary Suhu Park that were installed when the city of Boston, the then BRA, redesigned the park. Those were intended as a children's pleasure, but I think, as we've all observed, they don't really attract children playing. They are hard and not that appealing. What they attract is skateboarders, and more frequently, they are used by lawbreakers who are sleeping on them or passed out on them. So it is a negative rather than a positive, and we're committed to changing that. We allocated funds in the 2020 budget, our 2020 budget, for their removal and installation of some pilot equipment and other things there. We, unfortunately, with coronavirus, were not able to push that project forward, but we are absolutely committed to that happening by spring. We don't at this point have funds for it, but I am very optimistic that we will secure the funds and we will do this. The mounds would be removed, and then in their place, we would try out things based on the feedback that has come from the community through the Chinatown Master Plan and through the walks we've taken with Councilor Flynn and through the other dialogues. We're actively discussing this with AC/DC, given the proximity of their Chinatown backyard, and trying to have sort of complementary pilots occurring on our space and in theirs. That might be fitness equipment, that might be a ping pong table, but that regardless, it would be pilot for the 2021 season. And that we would take your feedback and be prepared to move the ping pong table somewhere else or remove the fitness equipment. I will say it is possible that if we are still living in a COVID-19 era, that we will remove the mounds and not add something like fitness equipment immediately because the surfaces that are hard to keep clean and so on. But we do intend to try and take them out for spring next year, and we do, health situation permitting, anticipate putting in benches and other things to make the area a lot more pleasant for the entire community to gather. Additionally, the lighting project here that would stretch the catenary lights, the string lights to the south and east of the vent shaft, that would be in the area where these mounds are. And so the combination of removing the granite mounds and adding the lights and potentially adding pilot other things, we think will very much change the character of that area, which right now is a problem.
I'm muted. Thank you. Are these lighting enhancements meant to replace the existing lighting in Chinatown on the Greenway or add more light fixtures to the park? Rebecca, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in most places, what we're talking about is removing existing fixtures and replacing them with new. So the poles in the Serpentine Path and the poles in the plaza, those would sort of be removed and replaced. In some cases, they will be replaced with an additional number of fixtures, but we won't just be sort of adding more to what's there. Then in other cases, like, the sail, we would be upgrading and repairing it, or in Mary Sue, we'll be adding to what's there. So, at least for the poles, you can think of it as a removal and a replacement. And then, in other places, sort of brand new fixtures that don't exist yet.
Apologies. Another COVID construction question. What are the implications of construction on the park? Will areas of the park be shut down for long periods of time? Jesse?
So, given the size of the park and the number of different things that we're doing, we imagine trying to be pretty surgical about this, where as we're working in one area, we have a small footprint that is closed, but that is pretty small, and that a lot of the areas that we're trying to work are not in the middle of where the activities are, because we don't want the infrastructure in the middle of where the activities are. So the edges of the plaza or a plant bed are the type of areas that the work would be occurring. So we don't imagine this would be particularly disruptive.
Great. Next question that came in is, when is Lantern Stories going to remain in the park until?
Yeah, so Yuan Wu, who, as a reminder, we will be having for the webinar, and we hope you will all tune in. Her work will be up until there's the threat of the first snow. It's the poles that exist now that we're prepared to replace through the lighting project are really not engineered for lots to be hung on them. And so they're not engineered for the lanterns to be weighted down by snow and ice. And so they will have to come down in November, or since the weather turns threatening, the forecast turns threatening. So once we have new poles that are installed, we're optimistic that we can do more with temporary installations without the cost, for example, or the disruption of the way it had to be done for Yuan Wu's work, where a jersey barrier is helping to weight the poles and wires are going from the poles to that jersey barrier. So this will come down. We think the future is brighter for putting up installations like this, more simply.
Excellent. And another public art question about Fur and Dye's Year of the Mouse work and the Serpentine Path, about what is the current de-installation date for that, as that provides light as well.
Yeah, Fur and Dye's work there is the latest in our public art curated series for the Zodiac years. And as we near the end of Year of the Mouse, so do we near the end of her installation. We anticipate that work coming down in January, as we have taken others down on that timetable, and that the new artwork for the Year of the Ox will go up at the same time. That artwork is not a light-based artwork, but it's also one that will be focused in the Serpentine Path area. We've identified the artist and been through concept design with him, and we're excited to have that artwork add to a long series of great Zodiac Year artworks.
Great, thank you. Well, as we're closing in on 6:30, definitely want to be respectful of folks' time. So unless anyone has any final questions that they want to add to the Q&A feature below, I just want to do, absolutely thank our staff, Jesse and Rebecca, and all the other staff that have been working on this project for a really long time to bring it to the stage we're at today, and we'll be bringing it through future stages. We will be putting this webinar video on our website as well as tonight's presentation, and we will also be forwarding that information along to everyone who is attending tonight. We'll be sending out an email after that. We want to do a big thank you to a lot of our stakeholders, 2 of our community board members who are here tonight, Rebecca and Linda, a former board member, Auntie Helen. Thank you for your great comment that you sent us earlier. And again, as Rebecca said, we do want to thank the Greenway Business Improvement District, the Mass Cultural Council, and our donors for helping to move some of these projects along. You see information on your slide today around how to support the Greenway and all our work. It's been a very interesting and unique season on the Greenway, and we have been really proud to bring the programming and public art and organic horticulture to everyone in Chinatown and along the length of the Greenway. So, in what's been a really hard year, we've been really grateful for this community and look forward to moving this project forward as well. So unless Jesse, Rebecca, you have any other thoughts? Thank you guys so much for attending, and we'll be sending out follow-up information to your email shortly.
Have a good evening. Thank you for your support, and please follow us for continuing updates on all these improvements that we have headed toward the Greenway in Chinatown.